you've heard about the economics of soil health with Jim. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how to get started. And here to share that information with us is Barry Fisher. Barry Fisher is our soil guru with the state of Indiana, Natural Resources Conservation Service. And how many of you guys have ever heard of Barry? Okay, quite a few. So for the rest of you that have never heard it, you're going to be in for a treat, and we'll let Barry go. Fire away.
All right, thanks, Gary. Yeah, there's a lot of pretty sad people if you're here. If you've heard me before and you're here again, I feel sorry for you. But you know, the thing that we find time and time again as we put on this soil health demonstration, we show all these things. And if we poll the people here, how many people want more water to go in their soil and they want higher water holding capacity? Most say, yeah, that's what I want. And if you look at, do you want your soil to fall apart after rain and crust and do you want this, or do you want a soil that has some strength and resilience and water pressures? Most say, yep, I want this. And so if this sounds really good to you, then how do we get there? You know, it's just, you just don't turn on a key or punch a button someplace and this happens. There's a logical step-in process to be a little more successful as we try to move toward a system where we're on the gain of organic matter rather than the degradation of organic matter. And I guess as I look at where we need to go in the way of production, where we need to do, and you looked at all the economics here, but if you look at the world demand for our food and our energy, you know, our grains, our agricultural land to produce that food and energy for the world, sustainable won't be good enough. I contend that you hear a lot about sustainability. I think we've got to go beyond sustainable. We've got to go into a regenerative agriculture. We've got to be in regenerative soil health so that all of the stuff, and there are a lot of our sponsors here today, we've got before us today some of the most fantastic technology that has unfolded in the last decade that we couldn't have even imagined a decade before. We've got genetics, we've got precision agriculture, we've got the abilities to manage pests like we've never had before. We've got hybrids that can withstand drought more than, I mean, we should have absolute dead corn right now in Indiana, and there's a lot of it that's still alive. Yeah, it's not what we want to see, it's hurting, but it should be dead. But we have to owe that to our genetics, that we've still got living crops out there. However, those have kept us going. Most of us have seen positive yield trends, taking advantage of those technologies that have been given to us. But just what if you could couple those with a truly functioning soil that replicates what you see if you do break out that fence row that Jim Horman was talking about? You know that that's really good. That blip shows up on your yield monitor. What if we could replicate that everywhere? Well, that's what we're going to try to step into. We're going to try to give a logical process how we would get there. Okay, and corn being kind of an environment that we're going to have in Indiana. All right. Heard 2 days ago. Remember, one thing that you have to do to make one of these systems work is you might just have to sell some of your other tillage equipment so that you have to make this work, right? I mean, if you've still got that crutch in your barn that you can go back to, you're less likely to really be devoted to making this system work. And that may be oversimplifying things a little bit, but you do have to really want to make this change. Okay, it is a lot of it is just in our mind. So we're going to try to build a working no-till system that focuses on soil health. And Ray said early on. He showed a bunch of farmers. He said, these guys aren't just no-tillers. And they're not just no-tillers. They all no-till, but they don't just no-till. They have a system of practices that complement each other, that lead to every management, every pass leads towards high soil health. That's the focus. If you get that soil functioning, good things happen. Okay? So what's the package? Can we put a package like this together for our corn and bean environment, and I guess I believe we can. I do think that it is founded in no-till, but not just no-till, that not just the absence of tillage, not just the cessation of tillage, but a no-till, a well-thought no-till system that is designed for success. Okay, so we want a quality no-till system as a foundation. As we look at no-till, how we manage nutrients has got to change. It has to be adaptive. We can't just follow a standard set of rules. You're not going to know necessarily in November what your nutrient management plan for the next year will be if you switch to a no-till system. It won't be, I can assure you, if it is, it won't be successful. This no-till, your nutrient management for a no-till system won't be what it was for your conventional tillage system. Timing, rate, products, how you apply it, how you place it, it's going to be different. Okay, and if it's not, if you're not willing to do that, this will be less successful. Okay, so we have nutrient management that is complementary of the no-till system and works together with the no-till system. If we're going to talk about cover crops, and if we're going to integrate cover crops in there, it's not just any old cover crop. Hey, well, I saw somebody else plant rye, I'll plant rye. If somebody else planted annual ryegrass, I'll plant annual ryegrass. It needs to have a strategy based on how are you managing your nutrients and what kind of no-till system are you under, or what kind of tillage system are you under. It has to be a strategy that also balances what's the crop rotation that you're in. And we may even need to change our crop rotation a little bit to make this system optimized. Okay? But all of these have to be integrated with each other and complement each other, or we won't be successful necessarily. There's a strategy to the whole system. And the beauty of it is, as I started out the conversation, we have today some precision technology, some tools, some genetics, some things that must be incorporated and taken advantage of to make the whole system work. We can't just drive all over the field every single year. That grain cart doesn't need to touch every square inch of every farm and every field every fall. We've got to think about every single operation. What is it doing to the soil health? Okay, what is it doing to the soil health? So we're going to use flotation equipment on our harvest equipment. We're going to spread residue as perfectly as we can spread it for the full width of the head. Because those are nutrients, that's how you're going to manage your moisture, that's how you're going to manage your temperature, that's how you're going to manage some of your even pest pressures. Okay? So it all has to work together, and you have to take advantage of all the technology that is available to us today into this system. Okay? Most of you are doing most of this anyway, and are very good at the precision technology, but you may not have been using that precision technology to maximize soil health. And that's what we're trying to get you to start thinking about today. Okay? So conservation cropping system. Let's talk about, Ray started out with all this biodiversity and how important biodiversity is. If we're going to have a functioning, successful no-till system that leads to soil health, then we've got to understand biodiversity, and it's probably one of the most important parts, most valuable parts of any system, ecosystem in the soil. Okay? What we're truly trying to do by integrating cover crops and managing our nutrients, managing compaction, and doing, things that we do with the corn planter to make no-till work better, we're making a greater range of pathways for that crop to get at the resources that it needs. Under a current conventional tillage system, we're going to go out there and we're going to plow it up, and we're going to disc it up, we're going to work it up, and then we're going to apply our fertilizers. And then if we don't get enough fertilizer and if we don't get enough rain, we're going to apply some more. And then if we still don't get rain, then we're going to put a center pivot and we're going to put water on. We're going to have to assure that water comes, and if it doesn't come, we're done. Okay? We've created a single pathway. Now we're really good at managing that single pathway to get nutrients. We're going to place nutrients. We know if we can time them closer to when that crop needs it, the nutrients, we know that we can do a better job of utilizing those nutrients. But we're still managing it for that single pathway to get those nutrients and to get water to the plant. When we switch to a no-till system, we want a greater range of pathways. We want water available from deep, but we also want nutrients available from deep. We want nutrients available from what we apply, but we want nutrients available from the soil as the microbes mineralize that soil and give us nutrients and spoon-feed nutrients to us throughout the year. Okay, so we're going to try to build many greater pathways for that crop to get at its resources that it needs under different stresses and under different environments. Okay, that's what we want to do. Okay, so everybody's talking about soil health, and you hear the word soil quality, and people like me sometimes use those interchangeably. They're slightly different, I believe. Soil quality tends to be more the things that we absolutely can manage and that we can measure. You can look at your soil test and see what's happening to organic matter. Organic matter is kind of a soil quality function, and you can manage for that. What doesn't come in some of those tests, and what we don't get in our normal management and look when we measure soil quality, we have a hard time thinking of it as a living system. When we talk about managing for soil health, we're going to manage for the living component of the soil. We have to understand that the soil needs to be living and full of life, full of diverse life, if we're going to maximize the health and the function of that soil to do all those provide all those multiple pathways for the resources of the crop. Okay? I'm trying to build a base here, I know, for where I'm going to go, and I'm going to get into some steps, but that's our goal. And if you're not thinking in that term, you're going to miss a key step along the way. But, you know, people in this room are extremely bright and understanding of their equipment, of their farm, of their soil, and of their conditions. If you'll just get yourself thinking about these things, you'll figure out what every pass and what every management decision you're making, whether it's having an effect on the health and the function of the soil. But we're going to try to give you some steps to get that going. We're going to make the soil alive. And it's hard to make the soil alive if we have that entire brown period from the time that soybeans start turning yellow in the fall, and the 2 and 3 and 4, sometimes 4 months that are left before there's just brown out there, that nothing's living, that we're really not capturing the sun's energy before the next crop starts growing and gets planted. A lot of times there's a good 2 months, at least, if not 4 months, of sunlight capture and processing and things that we can keep the soil alive during that period that we're today not taking advantage of. Okay? So we've got to keep the soil alive. If we do that, we're going to do a better job of keeping our crop alive and our crop very healthy on even marginal soils. We can improve the production of every soil if we keep everything alive. So good soil health is going to equal good crop health. Okay? We're talking about a fully functioning system, a fully functioning no-till system that will, if we accomplish this, breed a greater resilience to these climatic changes and environmental extremes that we seem to be getting. Okay? It's really about building resilience into this system is what we're really talking about. We're going to have these extreme cycles. If the extreme cycles are now the norm, we've got to figure out how we're going to be prepared for that. Okay? We can't buy organic matter. This has been said numerous times today, but here's the big one. Here's the big one that I think is so important to us. It not only stores, keeping that organic matter on a positive trend gives us water holding capacity. It's not only storing that water, but it's also allowing when these short, flashy rains come, we get more of it in our soil. Okay, so that's the important part of that organic matter, understanding why we've got to be on the build of organic matter, not the mine of it. Okay? And it's not just the organic matter, not any old organic matter. The most beneficial part of the organic matter is that reactive portion. Okay? And that reactive portion is so much more important to us. It's the more recently alive portion of the organic matter. It's that a lot of times it's up close to the surface. That's the part that's going to be cycling nutrients more frequently to us, more efficiently to us. That's the part that's going to help us with water infiltration and water holding capacity. So it's the reactive carbon that is extremely important to us. And it's basically just those things it's the most recently alive portion of your organic matter is what I'm talking about. Okay? So we've got to manage for that. And I'll address that a little further in just a few minutes. So, okay, I want cover crops. This cover crop seems to be a key component of leading toward this biodiversity and this soil health. How do I get that going in my soybeans? So this is going to be my version of if I were starting from the get-go, maybe I hadn't even been no-tilling very much, but I wanted to pursue this, what would be my step-in approach to get on the right path to this soil health, okay? Strategies for a corn soybean rotation. All right. The cover crop has to be something that complements not just the crop that preceded it, but the crop that's going to follow. Okay? So if we know we're going to have corn out there, and that's our next crop, what do we know about corn? What's the number one nutrient that we worry about in corn? Nitrogen, right? Okay, if we were going to plant a cover crop, we want to try a cover crop, what do we know about cereal grains? What if we plant wheat, for example, as a cover crop? Because, we just need a cover, we know we need a cover crop, so we're going to plant a cover crop. What do we know about wheat as a cover crop? What's the number one nutrient it wants? Nitrogen. Okay, so we got a grass following a grass. And in the spring of the year, when we plant into that, who was the first feeder to the trough? The wheat was already there, right? We've already talked about, Jim talked about the amount of nitrogen that gets mineralized out of the soil each year. And it does, it gets mineralized out of the soil. We would really like to capture that, and we've done a very good job of capturing that. It at least didn't get to a tile. At least it's still on the farm. We use that cover crop to sequester that nitrogen. That's a really good thing. And in a year like we had this last year, man, it really did a good job. It was pulling up nutrients and nitrogen, and it was getting the soluble phosphorus taken out, and it was getting all those available nutrients in it, ready to go in the spring of the year. And then we planted our corn into that, and the corn needs some of that soil nitrogen. Okay? Corn gets a lot of its nutrients from the soil. If you know that you're planting corn into the situation where it's already in cereal rye, you're going to absolutely have to have starter fertilizer at a high nitrogen rate to compensate for that nitrogen that's already tied up in the cereal rye or in the wheat, in the cereal grain. Okay? So strategically, you've made it a little more difficult for yourself to manage this right out of the gate. Strategically, you already know you're going to have to spend a little more money on some early nitrogen to compensate for that. Because in some years, you don't know if that wheat, if you let it get too tall or that rye gets too tall, you don't know if it's going to release it in time to get it back to the corn. And this year, in the middle of the drought, it didn't in a lot of cases. It's still on the farm. You've still captured those nutrients. You've still built organic matter with those nutrients, but the corn is trying to fight for nutrients. It was second person to the table. And I don't know at my house, when I grew up around my older brother, if I didn't get there pretty soon, I was going to be missing out on some of the stuff at the table. Okay? The corn's going to miss out on something at the table if it wasn't the first feeder to the trough, and it wasn't. Okay? So strategically, that might not be the best cover crop to put ahead of corn. Okay? Okay, conversely, we've got another situation right here. Here's corn after what? Can you tell from the picture? Corn after what? Corn, right? Can't grow corn after corn. You certainly can't no-till corn after corn. Everybody knows that, right? Have you heard that? You've heard that, right? But is this truly corn after corn? Or is this corn after something else? You can't see it because it's already dying down here. It's rotting down. Is this corn after a mixture of crimson clover and annual ryegrass. Crimson clover and annual ryegrass killed early while it was really high in protein. If it's really high in protein, what's it high in? Nitrogen. It's high in nitrogen. It's also then got a legume growing right along with it. Have we planted corn after corn, or have we planted corn after a high nitrogen producing crop, cover crop? You've changed the rotation, you've changed the biology, you've added the biological diversity that complements this next corn crop. Throw in the addition of some poultry litter that was put on as this ryegrass and crimson clover was planted, and now you've completely changed the carbon nitrogen, and look at that crop. Okay? It's obviously very healthy. It's got a situation that was complementary to it rather than working a little bit against it. So this would be, a strategy would be, ahead of corn, you'd like to have cover crops that as a minimum are going to release nitrogen early in the growing season and not tie it up as long. Okay? Now, you did give up some erosion control, you did give up some of the other benefits of a cover crop, so you got to ask yourself, you got to know, what's my resource concern? If serious erosion is your problem, you may have been better off with that wheat crop that I showed you before. In this part of the world, more times than not, though, I'm thinking having a cover crop that releases nutrients really quick in the flatter corn and the darker soils, I think is going to be more advantageous to you. Okay? So you have a high protein kind of a cover crop ahead of corn. Okay, what about, or something like Austrian winter pea or crimson clover, but all these nodules, this is the kind of thing that you're going to want to have ahead of corn. Something with high protein. Okay, that's your strategy there. So what about soybeans? What about soybeans? Are we worried whether they have enough nitrogen in the spring of the year? Okay. What if they don't have any nitrogen available in the spring of the year? What do they do about it? Make their own, right? They're going to make their own. You can't see it in this picture. This is actually Michigan State. I got this from the Kellogg Biological Station. Where Tim does a lot of work and Dale Much does a lot of work. In the year even earlier, seems like, and you really get good nodulation in that environment. The additional benefits that you have when you put soybeans into cereal rye, something like cereal rye, is what's one thing we're fighting in soybeans a lot right now from a weed control standpoint. What's a weed that's just out there? Mare's tail, right? How many people have gone by a field that cereal rye was the previous cover crop and looked at that soybean field for mare's tail? Anybody walked any of those fields? It's hard to find mare's tail where there's cereal rye. I don't know if it's totally illegal pathway to it, but it really knocks back and fights against, helps you fight against the mare's tail. Okay, so that's a benefit to beans. The other thing that really I think is a benefit with soybeans in the cereal rye, when it does finally fall down, you drill through it and you knock it down, then you've got a real map of stuff there. It's really mulching the soil, keeping the soil cool and keeping the soil moist. And how many people in August, last August, how many people would say, how are we going to make a bean crop? How many times do you hear this? What would you like to have in August if you really want a bean crop? Even a half an inch of water, right? Even a half an inch of water can make a bean crop in August. I suggest that this is your half an inch of water. This kind of mulch has the ability, if we get that rain, it's going to hold it longer, and it's the equivalent of half an inch of water. I think that's where some of the higher yields that you talk about, and ask some of the farm panels how they do with soybeans in the cereal rye later, see what they're talking about, and talk about good there. What if this rye gets away from it? Dave, does this look like a familiar picture? You got to be careful who you send stuff to. You know, they'll just use it against you. What happens if rye just kind of gets away from you, and should you still plant soybeans, or what should you do? Go out there with a mower and bush hog it, or what should you do? Any major penalty for rye getting away from you if you're planting soybeans? Most years, most times, I don't know, I should probably let Dave say this, but I'm going to say most years there's not a major penalty there. Soybeans seem to be able to plant in this environment. They seem to do just fine most years. At least I haven't come across very many times when soybeans suffered greatly from planting even into something like this. Okay, they seem to just do okay in that environment. Dave, you want to make a comment there?
Well, I'm supposed to speak later, so you're taking the slides.
Pays to be first on the program, earlier in the program. All right. Well, what I'm really getting at is the strategy is the soil kind of wants to be at this balanced diet. The soil wants to be at this 24-to-1, 20-to-1. There's a lot of different people that have different opinions, but it wants to be kind of balanced about that. So if you're dependent on the soil, which you are, to provide a lot of nutrients to your crops, a lot of what we apply doesn't wind up in the actual crop. The crop's still going to get half of what it needs just from the soil most years. What we're applying may get used down the line as it gets cycled through microbes and stuff like that eventually, but most of what we get is from the soil. So if it wants to be here, and we're putting out things like rye and wheat straw, and we let that go real tall, we have a high carbon to nitrogen ratio, then we're going to be deficient in nitrogen out there. So corn into that is going to be difficult. If you're going to plant corn, you want to plant cover crops that reduce that seed to N ratio. So now we're going to be freeing up nitrogen to that crop. Okay, so that's how that works. Strategically, we can talk about how to plant. Okay, so if I were starting out, I would look at my first no-till operation. If I had not been no-tilling, but I wanted to pursue soil health, my first no-till operation would be drilling or using a vertical tillage tool to establish something like cereal rye into corn stalks, into this year's corn stalks, knowing it's going to soybeans next year. That would be my strategy. Okay? I would probably then the next year plant a short season soybean into that rye. Preferably that would be the first soybeans I plant in the year so that I don't give up as much yield. Okay, that would be my strategy. My second no-till operation would be soybeans into that cereal rye. My third no-till operation would be that early bean would come off early, and then we would plant something that's a low C to N plant. Maybe it's going to even provide some nutrients. You could use your 15-inch planter if you wanted, but something like an oilseed radish or an oilseed radish and Austrian winter pea, something like that would be now my third no-till practice. My fourth no-till practice then would be corn into that cover. So the first time I no-till is my fourth no-till practice essentially, and I've already now got a very healthy functioning system if I've done all the other steps correctly. That's my step in getting this working. Okay, that would be a step-in approach for a corn bean farmer or a non Okay, bypass this. There's a whole discussion I could have on vertical tillage, but I'm gonna go past this one. Unless we want to have that discussion after lunch. Possibly have that. Okay. So, okay, if I'm going to have this system, how would I set up my planter differently? If I wanted to set up my planter for I'm now going to have these cover crops, is it going to be the same as if I was just no-tilling the soybean stuff? Right? Setup is the maintenance is still critical. There's a lot of different setups that can work. Here's a system where we had a spader closing wheel and a cast iron on the other side. If you're going to have a spader closing wheel, then a drag chain is important. That being said, some cover crops are a little viney, a lot of root mass. This doesn't work as well as it may work from some of your just straight no-till into soybean situations. Okay? It can if you're planting nothing but those cover crops that winter kill, like oats and oilseed radish. This would be a good setup. Okay? This would probably work just fine. Beauty of the cast iron and the spader wheels is they're heavy. So if they're heavy, notice you can take all the pressure off the down pressure off that, so that now you're not working against the linkage or the down pressure that's on your whole planting unit. You're lightening the whole deal up. You lighten the whole deal up, then you're managing for compaction even with your planting process. You're managing for soil health with your planting process. Every operation has to be about managing for soil health. Okay? This is what this does for you. It lightens your whole system up. You want to get the seed in there as lightly as you possibly can. Still yet, whenever you plant, you want every seed exactly the same depth and exactly the same spacing. Anybody's been to Bob Nielsen's talks knows the importance of that when we're chasing high yield. Okay? However, it's more than just the same depth. It has to be, you have to create the exact same environment. Now in cover crops, that environment is a little more challenging to make sure that it's exactly the same throughout your whole field and through all the different soil conditions, okay? So it's going to be a little different. So you've got to make absolutely sure if you're putting starter fertilizer, it's your knife that puts on your starter fertilizer is putting all of your fertilizer at exactly the same place throughout that system, okay? And so if you've got row cleaners, you still are probably going to have to consider at least getting the row cleaners that have adjustments on them, infant adjustments with floating row cleaners. Maybe they've even got the hydraulically managed, not hydraulically, it's pneumatically, right? Managed, I think I got a picture of it here in a minute, those row cleaners. As you change cover crop types, some of those you might just have to pull them completely up. Some of them you want to leave those down depending on when you kill it, the timing that you're killing the cover crops and so on. A lot of people are using downforce monitoring systems, and I think that's very important. It's that part of that technology that's available to us today that helps us do a better job as we plant into multiple covers. Okay, and I think that's highly advantageous to us. You not only get to monitor the down pressure, but you're monitoring everything else that's happening with that planter. If it's jumping a little bit, your spacing is getting off. I mean, this kind of technology is just extremely helpful to us. If you've got like, let's just say annual ryegrass, and a lot of annual ryegrass, and you're really doing a good job of getting it seeded in the fall, but you've got a really good stand of annual ryegrass. The beauty of annual ryegrass is it's got a massive root system that is building soil health rapidly. The downside to annual ryegrass is it's got a massive root system that's building soil health rapidly. Okay, so you've got all these roots that are really thick and really tight, and you're going to cut through that, you're going to open it up and drop a seed in there, but now you've got to try to get that closed, right? The system I showed you before, or standard rubber tires, trying to close that are in many cases not going to be real successful. Different people are trying different things. Mike Stark uses a picture of what he's got on his planter, the Dawn closing wheels. This offers two of the advantages I already mentioned. They're cast, so they're heavy. If they're heavy, you don't have to crank them down to close that slot as much. They're also got sharp edges, and they kind of are curved, so that sharp edge and are offset from each other, so you're almost kneading that soil back together, which is kind of what you need in that really, all that root mass that you're trying to close up, it almost needs to be kneaded back together like dough. Okay? So this kind of a system, and I've seen some other guys that are using some kind of curved tine type system to kind of close that, where you've got that really thick ryegrass roots and some of those kinds of things. Okay? I call that hydraulic, but that's not truly hydraulic, it's pneumatic control. There's going to be times that if you're running road cleaners, maybe there's a time when if you kill annual ryegrass when it's pretty short, and you come in maybe 2 weeks later exactly, and it's just it's dying, it's still kind of yellow, you can hit that, and those road cleaners can just flip a slab of that sod out. And sometimes I've seen it even where you've got to make the decision to just pull those all the way up and just slice through it and plant it. And then if you use opposing wheels to kind of put it back together, that'll work. You've got to read that condition because 2 days later, it may be perfectly fine to, it may just crumble just fine to go through there and run that row cleaner. Having the option to get that up and out of the way if you need to, or put it down, even put it down harder if you need to, having that flexibility is very advantageous when you've got multiple environments that you're going to be planting into. Okay? I just think that some of these technologies are really going to help you as you look at adopting some of these systems. Okay? That's a really quick run through it. I want to leave some time for questions because that step-in strategy that I talked about is kind of critical. So I don't know how to be paid. What's our time situation, Gary?
You got 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes for questions. Anybody got any quick questions on anything I said?
You got one over here, Eric.
Can you talk a little bit about the vertical approach?
No. Because it's very controversial, but real quick on middle. Just one quick thought on this. Figure out how to go with it. What about vertical tillage? If I'm stepping into this system from conventional tillage, I might want to step first into a vertical tillage system, okay? Because it's still going to chop up those stops and do some of those things. At least this is the theory that a lot of people have to do this. Okay, it's going to be one step closer to a no-till system and help you get your management in place ahead of that, and I'm okay with that. We would think that would be the right thing to size and incorporate tough residues, break up crust, compaction, warm and dry the soil. These are the things that most people are trying to use these for, possibly incorporate fertilizer, creates fewer tillage pans. If it's truly vertical tillage, you're wanting to get rid of any of that horizontal plane that's down below the soil. Okay? I guess I always throw this in. When we talk about vertical tillage, is this vertical tillage? And I think maybe it can be part of that system for sure, or should be part of that system. Not just that particular one, but cover crops in general. And what though? Let's ask ourselves, what if we're going to be cognizant of every pass across that field being a path toward high soil quality, what don't we want vertical tillage to do? Let's think about that for just a second. We do not want it to create horizontal density layers in the soil because that's what we were trying to get away from. Okay? We don't necessarily want to be throwing soil side to side, breaking down soil aggregates, because that's what we were trying to get away from. Okay? So, if the tool that you're looking at looks like a disc and acts like a disc, it's a disc. So, if you're going to be using vertical tillage, then use vertical tillage that does less of those two things. Okay? We don't necessarily want to bury all the residue because the residue on the surface is there to help protect the soil and those things. Okay? Okay. We don't want it doing this. This is a pit that we dug that was absolutely after a vertical tillage tool. And this is what we're trying to get away from. We don't want to destroy soil aggregates and eliminate the aggregate stability. The other thing is, remember my one slide on reactive carbon? Where is that reactive carbon at? We're trying to build organic matter. Where do we build organic matter generally. Where's most of the reactive carbon at? Top 2 inches, right? If you're really going to build organic matter, you kind of have to build it there. You can't just start building it at 4 feet and bring it up, right? You're going to build organic matter there. Now you can build some deep shafts and stuff, but if you're not building organic matter there, you're probably not building organic matter. And I would just suggest that too many of the tools, the way we're using them and calling them vertical tillage, we absolutely are not doing anything but destroying that portion of the organic matter that we're trying to build. We're trying to fix the soil from there. We just can't hardly fix it if all that oxygen is pumping it in and burning off that organic matter right there, and that's our active carbon. Unless, and I'll throw in a glass here in just a second, we don't want that biological disruption there, especially in the spring of the year when all the biology is waking up and getting really active right there at the surface of the soil. And what are we using a vertical tillage tool to do at that time of year? We're going to make the soil get dry, my gosh. Right? We'll just go ahead and make it get dry with this vertical tillage tool. And if we do that, it does make it easier to plant because now it's all dry, right? But it got all dry because we released all the moisture, we injected oxygen right there, and we let it off. We got a big flush of carbon right there, and that big flush of carbon is gone for good. So we didn't get to build any carbon at the soil surface back here. If we're doing that every year, then that's going to be very hard to build soil health with that. Okay? This is just me talking. People will dispute me on this, but so what should we expect? Reduce soil surface compaction because we're trying to break that crust. Okay? Good surface residue, good management, good distribution. If we're going to do that, good soil structure, good pores. Minimize carbon loss, and minimize biological disruption. We can do this and use this tool and manage it for that, and while getting these things, good things will happen. Okay? So that should lead to better water and air infiltration, what we've been talking about, improved nutrient cycling, improved production, and soil function. And I'm just going to say that if you really want to run this, run it in the fall. It still sizes the residue, gets rid of those stalks that are going to be eaten alive, and then just come through the window with those big corn stalks. It's telling me the BT stalks won't break down. If you want them to break down, run these in the fall, but put a seeder on there. Now you really increase the biological diversity, and any loss that you get in that surface organic matter there, you're immediately planting a cover crop that's going to have the next 4 months, all the winter months, to protect the soil and regain that and take it even beyond maybe where it was. So use it if you want to run these. The best possible use you can have is run that as a seeding tool in the fall so that you get the cover crop established, and then now you're going to be on the path to building this. You've accomplished all that sizing of the residue that you wanted to do and a lot of the things that you wanted it to do. Now you're on the path to building soil organic matter instead of just burning it off. Okay? It's my, that's my editorial on where vertical tillage should be used, how it should be used, and how it should not. And it probably goes. A lot of people, probably not very many people in the room that doesn't own one of those tools. So I know I'm on touchy ground there when that question gets asked. Okay? How'd that cover it? You got my opinion, whether you agree with it or not, right? Okay?
Got time for 1 or 2 more.
Right here. Well, our regulation is real wet. We just have action issues, water and little. We just issues with abilities and pile and stuff. I mean, these cover crops and they go right up that action just is a
If we want to use the vertical till to help that, put it with the cover crop. The question was really wet, heavy soil, which is, you got some of that around here, right? Okay? Really wet, heavy soil. People are wanting to break that up so that we get oxidation. Tillage begets tillage. If you use tillage to break it up because it's wet, then the next year you're absolutely sure it's going to need to have tillage to break it up because it's wet. So if you break it up because it's wet and you incorporate a new strain of biology in a root system that can hold those pores open, now you're on the path to not having to do that the next year. You'll never get out of that path of doing it if you just keep doing it. You do what you did, and then you'll get what you got. Okay? If you're not going to fix wet, heavy, crusted soil with a tool that was what caused the wet, heavy, crusted soil. Okay? So you got to introduce something different into the system to take it to a new level. Okay?
Anything you're going to talk about Jefferson today? Help me alleviate from just my experience for a ton of Jefferson last fall on the field. I'm in more southern Illinois, and it was the driest, best soil conditions when I planted this spring. So I just was my first fall spreading that Jefferson. So.
You'll have some people on the farmers panel I know that is going to probably talk about that a little bit. But I think in most cases, there's also using that in conjunction with improving the soil biology along with that. Yes, there are amendments that can help the soil and change the soil crusting characteristic and some of that. But you'll once again, you'll double your benefit if you also incorporate biological processes there with that. I'm getting the look. All right.